The next witness to give evidence from the curtained witness box was Soldier G. Towards the end of the previous day, the coroner was made aware of the fact that throughout the whole time Soldier F was in the witness box, a reflected image of him could be seen in the polished door behind him. By the following day, the situation had been rectified. A sheet of brown paper had been placed over the door. Soldier G told the court that he was a bomb disposal officer and that he'd identified the car left by Savage as a suspect bomb because the radio aerial looked much older than the car itself. Then came Soldier E. He told the court that he'd been the tactical commander of soldiers A, B, C, and D. At a briefing at midnight between the 5th and 6th of March, he and his men had been told that a large car bomb was being brought into Gibraltar and detonated by radio control, described as a button job.
I would like to tell you that there were 2 points I particularly emphasized to my soldiers, both before and after this briefing. Firstly, that at least one of the 3 terrorists, if not more, would in all probability be armed. And secondly, there was a strong likelihood that at least one, if not more, of the 3 terrorists would be carrying a button job device.
So you particularly emphasized these 2 points to your men?
Correct.
Had they already been emphasized at the briefing on the night of the 5th and 6th?
Correct. Arrest was the aim of the operation. The plans were for the soldiers to initiate the arrest. This was because of the great danger posed by the terrorists. However, the plan was also for a policeman to be with the soldiers, for 2 reasons. Firstly, in order to be an eyewitness, and secondly, to take over any arrested persons from the military. The police commissioner has laid down the following priorities for the operation. Firstly, arrest. Secondly, disarm. And thirdly, defuse.
The next witness was Soldier A, the first of the 4 soldiers who shot the deceased. Before Soldier A gave his evidence, the coroner delivered a warning. He was to give the same warning to soldiers B, C, and D.
Now, Soldier A, before you start giving your evidence, under the rules, the coroner's rules, I have to warn you that you're not obliged to answer any question that might tend to incriminate yourself. In view of the evidence that you're giving, I suppose practically every question will be incriminating, so I don't propose to repeat my warning. And if there is any time, a moment, when there is any question that you feel you should not answer, you need not answer it. I'm sure that your counsel will advise you should it become necessary. Now, you're a member of the SAS?
I am, sir.
You were in Gibraltar on the 6th of March?
I was, sir.
Do you remember details of the day?
Yes, sir.
Who were you paired off with?
Soldier B.
Soldier A gave evidence that he'd spent the afternoon patrolling with Soldier B. He'd heard over the radio that Savage had been identified parking a suspect car bomb. At 3:40 p.m., he was given authority to arrest. At this point, he said, he and B met up with one of the security service watchers who led them towards Farrell, McCann, and Savage.
The watcher informed me that the terrorists were on the right, which I duly looked at and recognised the terrorists immediately.
3 of them?
3 together, yes, sir.
Whereabouts?
Down to my right, and that's where the junction came into the road coming down Smith Dorian, and the other road actually meets on that corner of Winston Churchill.
Yes, I think you can have a look at the plan now. Exhibit 4, I think. Will you read this map?
Yes, sir. As I explained, I came through the tunnel, and as you come out, the playground is right in front of you. We were at the junction with the watcher. I was actually at the T-junction.
Yes. On the road before it meets Smith Dorian, you see the dotted lines indicating a pedestrian crossing?
Yes, sir.
Were they more north than that?
Yes, just slightly up, in and around that area at that stage.
Yes. Can the jury see? Right then, what happened?
I then saw that all 3 terrorists were together, sir, talking and smiling.
Soldier A said that at this point, the 3 IRA members split up. Savage headed towards where he and Soldier B were standing. As he passed them, he bumped into Soldier A's shoulder. Farrell and McCann turned north along Winston Churchill Avenue towards the Shell service station. Soldier A said that he and Soldier B followed Farrell and McCann, leaving Savage to Soldiers C and D, who he knew from radio messages were nearby.
Right, okay, carry on. You're moving forward.
As I was getting closer to Farrell and McCann, McCann then looked over his shoulder, over his left shoulder, sir. That is, he looked over, but his body didn't turn, looking over his left shoulder, and he was smiling at the time.
Where were you?
I was behind him, sir.
How far behind?
Approximately 10 metres, and that is approximately. It may have been closer at the time.
He was on the pavement.
He was on the right-hand side of the pavement and nearest the garage, and Farrell was on his left shoulder nearest the roadside. I was directly behind McCann, and Soldier B was directly behind Farrell, sir.
So McCann looks back.
Over his shoulder, yeah.
And then what happened?
He had a smile on his face, and he looked over, and he looked straight at me, sir. We literally had what I would call eye-to-eye contact. Well, we looked directly at each other, and the smile went off McCann's face. And it's hard to describe. It's almost like McCann had a realisation of actually who I was, or I was a threat to him. The look in his face was of alertness, and he was very aware. So this came over his face, and at that stage then, I was just going to shout a warning to stop.
You were going to shout?
Yeah, and at the same time, I was drawing my pistol. I went to shout stop. If it actually came out, I honestly don't know. But I went to shout stop, and the events overtook the warning. The look on McCann's face, the alertness, the awareness of him. He looked at me, then all of a sudden, his right arm, well no, his right elbow, actually moved aggressively across the front of his body, sir. At that stage there, I thought the man McCann was definitely going to go for the button. Uppermost in my mind...
A button or a gun?
For a button, sir. To me, the whole worry was the bomb and the debussing area. On that particular Sunday itself, I noticed a couple of ships in the harbour. Quite a few people around about the area of Main Street. Uppermost in my mind was this bomb. If he had gone for the button, I mean, to press the button which would have detonated the bomb which was in the car, or at that time believed was in the car. So on doing that, as I said, I was drawing my weapon. I fired at McCann, one round into his back. I then, now at the corner of my eye, Farrell had a bag under her left armpit at this stage. She had actually moved to the right and was grabbing the bag.
To the right? That means she was turning inwards towards McCann?
Yeah, correct, sir, just half a turn. I thought she also was going for the button, so I shot Farrell in the back once, sir, and I fired one round at McCann, which was the first round. The second round, single round, was at Farrell. I then engaged Farrell with a further 3 rounds, sir, 1 to the body and 2 to the head. He was falling all the time.
You said Farrell?
Sorry, McCann. 1 round at McCann, 1 round at Farrell, back to McCann, a further 3 rounds.
1 to the back of the head?
Correct.
In that order?
Yes, in that order. McCann then fell down. He was on the ground and his hands were away from his body. At the same stage, Farrell was now on the ground. However, at that stage there, I noticed a police car siren was going, and it was coming from the sundial on the opposite side of the road to the barrier, coming back south. I put my hands up in the air, and I still had my pistol in my hand, and I shouted, "Police," and I said that a couple of times. I believe it was 3 policemen virtually rushed out of the car and leapt over the barrier towards us.
Soldier A told the court that he and Soldier B had been driven away from the scene in a police car and reported to Soldier E before handing their weapons and remaining ammunition to the Gibraltar police. He then faced questions from Mr. McCrory.
Soldier A, when the killings were all done on that day on the 6th of March, and eventually you found yourself alone, it may have been a long time afterwards, alone with your own thoughts. What thought was uppermost in your mind about what you had seen and done?
Uppermost in my mind at that stage, sir, I would have said that we had stopped the detonation of the bomb that I believed at that time was in that debussing area.
To that extent you had a feeling of, or a sense of satisfaction?
I felt, sir, that the bomb had not been detonated in the debussing area. How I exactly felt, I really don't know, sir, to be honest. I did not evaluate it at that time. Relief might have been the word, sir, perhaps.
Any regrets?
At what, sir?
At these human beings' death?
Of course it's regretful, sir.
Did you regret it?
Sir, the lives of 3 people taken is not to be taken lightly by anybody.
That's what I wanted to know. Were you sorry about it?
I was not happy about it, sir.
Is that the same thing?
I was not happy about the deaths, sir.
Of course, at that time, you had gone back and you had talked to Soldier E.
That is correct, sir.
Was he shocked? He didn't show any shock in any way, did he?
What type of shock are you talking about?
Well, he didn't say to you, for instance, what in the name of heavens went wrong here? You were supposed to arrest these people.
No, sir. As I said, I told Soldier E what happened.
And he took it perfectly calmly, didn't he?
He didn't get chastised, if that's what you're trying to get at.
Did it occur to you at that stage to feel that you had made a bit of a mess of this operation?
How do you mean, sir?
Well, you had set out under orders to arrest some people, and you ended up shooting them dead.
I shot McCann and Farrell, sir.
Dead.
Correct, sir.
But you were meant to arrest them.
Correct, sir. To use a minimum amount of force.
Death is a fairly maximum result.
That is correct, sir.
And you did not feel, perhaps, that you might have acted a little differently?
No, sir. At that stage, with what I thought they were doing and about to do, if I was with the same facts that I was then, now, then I would do it again, sir. Exactly the same on the facts that I had and what I thought at that time and the aggressive actions that were taking place, I would do it again, sir.
Are you there?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Soldier Ray, I would remind you that you are on oath.
Yes, sir.
What distance did you say you were when the incident began with drawing your gun?
Sir, I believe 3 to 5 metres. Again, these are approximate. I don't honestly know.
At that stage, they had their backs to you.
That's correct, sir.
Where was B?
B was on my left, sir.
So, a sudden rush, a few paces forward, and you could have had a gun presented to their backs.
Even so, McCann at this stage was turning around and looking at me. We had eyeball-to-eyeball contact, and the smile went off his face, and he was totally alert.
But he had his back to you all this time.
Sir, he had his back towards...
He was still talking.
He was still talking, sir. Seemed like an age. It was probably a fraction of a second. I honestly don't know.
That's right. It couldn't have been much more than a fraction of a second. This glance that you got. A mere fraction of a second.
To me at that time, sir, it seemed like an age.
And then there came this movement.
Say again?
There came this movement, now that we've heard about.
Yes.
When the movement came, you had your pistol out.
So it was coming out, halfway out. It might have been fully out. I don't recall.
What was the movement?
The arm, its head was moving back to the front with alertness, and the shoulder and the arm came round to the front of the body. It was at that stage then that I was going to shout stop. And as I said, I don't know, part of it came out, all of it came out, or none of it came out, I don't know.
Tell me now you've had time to think about it. What was he doing?
I don't know, sir.
In 6 months, you've had thought of this a lot, haven't you?
I have thought of it, yeah.
Talked about it too?
I have discussed it with Mr. Hucker.
And in all this time, as you stand there, you can't produce a single idea as to why he should have made a sudden movement?
Sir, I don't know.
Well, I put it to you. You don't know because it never happened.
It did happen, sir.
And you shot him in the back without any movement whatsoever, indicating that he was a danger.
Sir, he did make a movement.
And then Miss Farrell does something, does she?
I spotted her out of the corner of my eye. The bag under the armpit, and I see her swing the bag left. The bag actually came round, and I interpreted that she was going for a button.
A shot has rung out at this stage?
It has, sir, yes.
And when you fire the shot at McCann's back, Miss Farrell made a jerky movement?
So it seemed to me it was an aggressive movement with the left shoulder to move the bag round.
If she heard it, it's possible it would be very startling.
Possibility.
And people who are startled can jump.
I would presume so, sir, yes. But it was not a jump. It was a movement of the bag across the body.
And you don't have any explanation after 6 months of what on earth Miss Farrell was up to?
Sir, I don't know at the time. I believe she was going for a switch in the bag. What she was actually doing, I don't know, sir.
Let's concentrate for a minute or a moment on what she knew. Then I will ask you to see if it helps. She knew she had no gun and no switch. Keep that fresh in your mind. I'm asking, can you offer us any explanation of what she was doing, since she certainly was not going for a gun or a switch?
No, sir, as I said, I don't know what she was doing. I thought she was going for the switch.
I'm suggesting to you that you and your friend killed both of them. You intended to kill them. An arrest was not at that stage on your mind.
Sir, I was intending to arrest McCann and Farrell.
And that you, on the ground on that day, had killing on your mind and not arrest.
Sir, I went out to arrest McCann and McCann and Farrell.
I know that you say that the actual wording of the minimum force rule of law was put to you, but by nods and winks and briefings which filled your mind with certain ideas, it was conveyed to you that killing was what was desired here.
No, certainly not.
Without it being said so in so many words?
Certainly not, sir.
You've told us about the bag.
That is right, yeah.
I wonder. This is Exhibit 52. Is that Miss Farrell's bag? Yes. It is a larger bag than appears from that because it is crumpled up. It may be necessary to open it up. I don't want the actual contents, but I would like the jury to see the actual bag and the size of it. Spread it out, officer. You can pass that to Soldier A. As best you can you show us where the bag was with Miss Farrell as she was walking down the road?
Could he move forward a tiny bit, consistently with not being seen?
The strap was over the shoulder. Seemed to be like that. That is how I saw the bag.
There was obviously a bag with all the contents in it.
Yes.
If you could quickly show us what was the movement she made just before you fired?
It was like that. It was almost as if she was like that.
Pulling it across her?
Yes.
With the right hand?
Everything came across and I was aware it was there.
If you could, pass that bag carefully to the officer. I've put Exhibit 171 in the bag. I would certainly like...
Pardon me, I rarely interrupt, Your Honour, but if my learned friend is about to give demonstrations to the jury on the basis of an exhibit, which is not an instrument that was ever used in this case, and the use of it is purely speculative, and the size of it is purely speculative, I am unhappy that may give the jury the wrong impression. Wrong impressions can easily be created by visual demonstrations.
Exhibit 171 had been produced earlier in the inquest as an example of the type of detonating device used by the provisional IRA in the past. No detonating device had in fact been found among the belongings of the deceased.
I make it crystal clear that this exhibit, 171, was not present at the time, but it is openly admitted. What could have happened could be well demonstrated in this way, simply asking the jury to look at the bag and one of the normal IRA transmitters, and to consider whether Soldier A's line of consideration, bearing in mind the movement, is reasonable.
Well, you could do that without necessarily putting the exhibit in.
It is a matter entirely for Your Honour. It is a suggestion made by Soldier A's evidence, because Soldier A said uppermost in his mind was one of these sorts of devices, and this is the most common of these sorts of devices.
The jury will have to draw a conclusion as to whether that bag is big enough to hold such a device inside it.
I would ask the jury to think about that and have a look at it. In my submission, this is a very critical point in the case, given the history. It was the start of the shooting.
I think the best thing for the jury is that I tell them in my summing up. Any further questions?
In some way, were you asked Soldier A to commit murder?
Absolutely not.
Is that the truth?
That is the truth.
The whole truth?
The whole truth, sir.
Members of the jury.
We have one question. When you say that Farrell made an aggressive movement, could you describe the movement as a sudden movement?
A sudden move?
Well, I just want a straight yes or no. When you say that Farrell made an aggressive movement, could you describe the movement as sudden instead of aggressive?
To me, at that time, it looked an aggressive move.
Could you also describe it as a sudden movement?
It was very sharp.
Would you agree that a sudden movement could also be described as a startled movement?
The movement I saw, I believe, was a sudden, quick movement, like a violent move. That is the best I can explain it.
Would you agree that sudden movement could also be described as startled movement, surprised movement?
It didn't strike me as startled. I would describe startled as jumping, as if with shock. This was not. This was like that.
Soldier B was next. His evidence confirmed that of Soldier A. Soldier B told the court that he'd seen McCann turn out of the corner of his eye. He'd heard an unintelligible shout, which he presumed came from Soldier A, and then, almost immediately, firing had begun. Soldier B agreed with Mr. McCrory that Farrell and McCann might not have understood the warning, but like Soldier A before him, he denied that they'd been shot while lying on the ground or from a range as short as 3 or 4 feet.
If Soldier E had given you any indication, regardless of what was being formally said by others at briefings, that you were in fact to go in and shoot Farrell and McCann, would you have done so?
No, sir.